In Yuma County, Colorado, there was one answer for wet ground. You buried pipe under it. You drained it hard, planted through it early, and called that good management. Then Naomi Mercer came home from college and told her father the wettest field on their farm was the last field he should drain. The county laughed because they thought she was protecting a bad field. She was actually protecting the only water they were going to have when the drought arrived. The Mercer place sat outside Ray, where the county road turned to gravel and the wind had enough room to get mean before it hit the house. Evan Mercer had farmed that ground for 3 decades, winter wheat on most of it, milo on the driest corners. The same disciplined caution year after year. He had survived bad seasons by refusing to get clever. So when his daughter came home from Colorado State with an agronomy degree, a truck full of notebooks, and a plan that sounded upside down, he heard her out, but not with much hope. Naomi wanted to leave the North Basin undrained, no tile, no fast escape route for the water. Instead, she wanted to seed a switchgrass infiltration strip through the natural draw, plant dryland safflower around it, and let the depression do what the farm had spent years trying to stop it from doing: hold water. Not as standing water forever, as recharge, as stored insurance in a county that kept acting like April was the whole year. At the kitchen table, Naomi spread out the field maps, the research papers, the handwritten budgets. When she finished, Evan tapped the edge of the basin map and said the sentence she had been waiting for. That field needs tile. He did not say it angrily. He said it like a fact. Naomi said, "That field is the only place on this farm still trying to save us water." She was not guessing. At Colorado State, she had studied under Dr. Lydia Voss, a dryland systems researcher who spent years warning farmers about a trade they hated hearing described as a trade. In semi-arid country, aggressive drainage can make a farm easier to enter in a wet spring, while quietly making it weaker when the dry years come back. The mechanism was simple. Subsurface drainage solves an access problem by moving water off the field faster than that water can feed the shallow profile and the perch zones above the deeper aquifer. In wetter climates, that can be worth it. Out here, on thin rain and declining wells, it can become a slow leak in the future. Safflower was the part nobody liked. Wheat County men will listen to strange science a little longer than they will listen to a strange crop. But safflower fit the basin. It rooted deeper, needed less from the field at the wrong moments, and made more sense on ground that could not be trusted to behave like the rest of the farm. Joan Mercer, still standing at the sink, finally said, "The dry years always come back." It was the first sentence Naomi heard in her favor. Evan did not say yes that night, but he did not call the contractor either. 3 weeks later, Naomi made the mistake that turned a family argument into a county story. She mentioned the plan at Markham Farm Supply. Glenn Markham had spent most of his life selling seed, fertilizer, and certainty to Yuma County farmers. He looked at her over the counter and said, "Safflower?" "In the North Basin," Naomi said, "and no tile." Then he laughed, not cruelly, worse, easily, like she had said something too unserious to deserve a fight. A couple of men near the counter smiled because Glenn had already decided the scene for them. He asked if her father knew. Naomi said it was her plan and he was considering it. Glenn nodded once, half smiling. "You tell Evan," he said, "if he wants to turn a wet wheat basin into a safflower experiment, I can sell him the crop insurance to watch it die properly." Naomi did not argue. She paid for her things, drove home, parked by the machine shed, and sat in the truck until the humiliation cooled into something more useful. That evening, Evan gave her the basin. 86 acres, no tile. Her management. One condition. If it failed, he would drain it the next spring, and the argument would be over forever. Naomi said yes. The first season did not look dramatic. That mattered. Truth rarely arrives with fireworks. She ordered seed from western Nebraska, laid out the switchgrass strip through the natural draw, adjusted the planting passes to the shape of the basin, and installed a simple observation well so the field would have to argue with numbers instead of opinions. All summer the basin looked wrong. Wrong crop, wrong rows, wrong color, wrong idea. But by harvest it had outperformed the best wheat ground on the farm on net return. Not by fantasy numbers, by enough. Enough that Evan looked at the sheets twice. Enough that he did not mention the drainage contractor. Enough that Glenn Markham stopped joking about it in front of Naomi, even if he still did it when she was not around. Then the county got the year that settles arguments. The drought arrived in 2003 the way plains droughts often do, with absence. A winter that never paid the soil back, a spring that teased and missed, winds that kept lifting whatever little moisture remained. By May, the county looked nervous. By June, it looked exposed. The wheat came off thin. Sorghum stands struggled. Some farmers started talking about chopping feed instead of waiting for grain that was never going to fill. Naomi's basin did not look comfortable. It did not look magical. It looked stressed. But stress is not the same as failure. The observation well showed the hidden difference. The water table under the basin had risen instead of falling. Forever. Not by miracle. By enough. Enough that the small supplemental well on the Mercer place could still pull clean water at the exact moment head formation mattered most. Naomi ran it lightly. Late. Just enough. On neighboring farms, the ones that had drained every low pocket they could reach, the story looked different. Wells lagged. One pumped sand. Another dropped hard enough that acreage had to be abandoned. The county had optimized field access and called that resilience. The sky stopped cooperating and exposed the lie. In September, Naomi harvested the basin. The numbers ended the conversation. Her safflower field, on the acreage everyone said needed pipe, came through the driest season in decades with a net that beat the farm's wheat ground cleanly and beat several neighboring operations by a margin nobody could laugh at. Evan sat at the kitchen table with the field books open and said nothing for a long time. Then he said, "You were right about what that ground was doing. Not about safflower, not even about the basin, about what the ground was doing. That was the real reversal. Because the proof was never just that one crop beat another. The proof was that Naomi had identified the correct control variable while the county was still worshiping the convenient one. Wet ground had never been the enemy. Misread ground was." That fall, Evan handed management decisions to Naomi on the full farm. He would still run equipment, he would still work, but rotation, field design, and long-range planning were hers. It was the cleanest form of respect he knew how to give. The morning Glenn Markham drove out to the Mercer place, Naomi was greasing a planter in the shed. He got out of the truck slower than usual. Evidence will do that to a man. He told her farmers had started asking questions about safflower, about recharge, about why her basin had held when other fields came apart. Naomi let the silence sit. Then she reminded him what he had said in the store. To his credit, Glenn did not pretend he had forgotten. But Naomi did not let the lesson shrink into a personal apology. She said, "This isn't about one crop beating wheat. It's about what happens when everybody designs for the easy month and nobody designs for the hard year." Then she handed him 2 pages, one on the basin results, one on the water table measurements. That was how the wider change began. Not suddenly. Counties do not pivot suddenly. They erode toward new truth, season by season, until one day people remember the old certainty as if it had always been foolish. A few farms tried partial basins. A few tried safflower. More important than the crop, some of them stopped draining every depression on site. The Mercer farm changed too. Wheat, safflower, millet, cover crops, more deliberate residue management, less blind loyalty to what a proper farm was supposed to look like. The place became more profitable, yes. More importantly, it became harder to break. Years later, Naomi was invited to present her field data at a regional dryland conference in Fort Collins. She stood at the podium and walked growers, agronomists, and extension people through the basin, the measurements, the drought response, and the cost comparisons. No drama, just proof. When she finished, the room held still for a beat, and then the applause started. Evan Mercer stood first. Naomi saw him halfway back in the crowd, hands rough, shoulders older, trying in the only way he knew how to show her what the moment meant. She had not needed the room to believe her anymore, but she needed that. By the time Naomi had been managing the Mercer farm for nearly 2 decades, the North Basin still had no tile in it. The switchgrass ribbon was thicker, the field edges were cleaner. The observation well still wore the same cap she had put on it as a 22-year-old trying to prove something more important than a point. The county had changed some, not enough to become wise all at once, enough to become less stupid. A handful of farms copied the basin logic directly, more adopted pieces of it, some diversified, some stopped confusing drainage with intelligence. A few kept doing exactly what they had always done, and paid for that preference in declining wells and thinner options. Then the story earned its ending. Naomi's daughter Eliza came to the kitchen table with her own notebook and a proposal for grazing cover crop acres with a small sheep herd to cycle fertility and cut purchased inputs on the outer blocks. Naomi looked at the pages. Evan sat at the end of the table with his coffee, older now, mostly quiet, still listening, and Naomi asked the only question that mattered. "Walk me through the numbers." That was the inheritance. Not the land by itself, not the crop plan, the listening, the refusal to let local certainty outrank physical truth. In 2021, 20 years after Naomi Mercer came home and told her father not to drain the field everybody wanted drained, the water table under the North Basin stood more than 5 feet higher than when she started measuring it. On neighboring ground that had been aggressively drained through the 2000s, the decline kept going the other direction. The aquifer under eastern Colorado is still under pressure. Naomi did not solve that. What she proved was smaller, and because it was smaller, more useful. A farm does not become resilient by forcing every acre to behave the same way. It becomes resilient when somebody on it is willing to read the ground for what it is, not for what tradition wants it to be. She planted safflower in a wheat county. They laughed. Then the dry years came back, exactly as they always do. The tiled fields dried fast. Her basin held. And the notebook, the one everybody thought belonged to a girl who did not understand real farming, turned out to be the most practical object on the property.